Okay, so let us discuss linguistics and poetics that was written by Roman Jacobson. Poetics deals primarily with the question, what makes a verbal message a work of art? Okay, actually what we discussed in Aristotle Poetics, that is a treatise on the rules to construct a drama. That's what we discussed. Not only the drama, even we discussed what is epic, what are the rules of epic poetry, and this drama. And we discussed poetry, drama, epic, and a comedy, and some rules pertaining to create such literary texts. Okay, that is poetics, what we discussed in Aristotle Poetics. But here, this poetics as a particular topic or area of research or area of study. Okay, already I told you that Aristotle wrote two books. Okay, two major texts, poetics and rhetorics. And I told you that poetics deals with the art of poetry, and rhetorics deals with the art of speech or the art of speaking. Okay, so here this poetics, simply we can say the study of poetry or the study of literariness. Actually, here we are going to make what it is clearly. We are going to understand what it is clearly. Okay, poetics deals primarily with the question, what makes a verbal message a work of art? Okay, a work of art. That's why from this point we can understand that poetics may deal with the literary art, or we can say deal with the literature, So what makes a verbal message a work of art? Okay, what does it mean? All the verbal messages can't be poems. All the verbal messages can't be literary pieces. Okay, you may speak in a conference or you may speak in a meeting. That can't be that can't be the part of literature. Okay, you may participate and you may speak in debates. That is verbal. Surely that is the verbal message, but that can't be an art. That can't be a part of the literature. That can't be the part of literature. So here, what makes a verbal message a work of art? Okay, so we can understand that all the verbal message can't be literary message. But here we are going to know what makes it different from the other verbal art. What makes it, or what makes the verbal message a work of art apart from all other verbal messages? And what characteristics or what features we can identify to prove that something is literary, or a work of art. Okay, of course, there are many times, there are different arts. Among them, we are discussing verbal art. That may be fine art, okay, and that may be performing arts. But we are discussing, okay, verbal art, that is literature. Okay, that is literature. So what makes it? What makes some message a work of art? That may be dealt by poetics. Because in poetics, the main subject of poetics is differentia specifica. That means Specific differences. Specific differences of verbal art. Specific differences of verbal art. So in this poetics, the main subject is to study what are the specific differences of this verbal art which distinguish this verbal art from other arts, or this verbal art from other arts, and from this verbal art which distinguish this verbal art from other verbal messages also. Okay, the distinction between any two arts, and within this verbal art, okay, we can make the distinction between the general verbal message and the verbal art. General verbal message and verbal art. This is what we are going to know. Okay, so in poetics, but in our topic, okay, in our topic, linguistics and poetics, this Raman Jacobson, at the beginning, he will give you, or he will give us a statement. What is the relation between these two, linguistics and poetics? That at the end of this topic, that statement will be proved. That is the main topic here. That is the main idea in this topic. Okay, let us see what may be that statement, and before that, let us understand few more points. So, because the main subject of the poetics is differentia specifica, that means the specific differences of the verbal art in relation to the other arts, in relation to the verbal arts, and in relation to other kinds of verbal behavior, in relation to other kinds of verbal behavior, or that may be verbal behavior. We can say the language is language is verbal behavior. You know, whatever we speak, that is verbal behavior. Okay, so the usage of the language is verbal behavior. Okay, not only this poetics, in this poetics, not only we differentiate, this poetics not only from other arts, we distinguish the verbal art not only from other arts. Within this verbal aspect, we can distinguish the verbal art from other verbal behavior, from other kinds of verbal behavior. Then poetics is entitled to the leading place in literary studies. Right? So in literary studies, okay, this poetics is in leading place. Okay, so the poetics mainly deals with the problem of verbal structure. Okay, so even in the object of study that is written by Ferdinand de Saussure, we discussed one point, that what is independent in linguistic phenomena. To decide the object of study, what is the independent aspect, or what is the independent phenomenon in the linguistics? Simply, he told that he come to the conclusion that the verbal structure of the verbal structure, or the linguistic structure is independent. That's what he mentioned. Okay, so here in this topic, we can understand that poetics deals with the problem of verbal structure. Okay, since linguistics is the global scene of verbal structure, Okay, linguistics is the global scene of verbal structure. Poetics may be regarded as an integral part of linguistics. An integral part of linguistics. Okay, here he is going to connect. He is going to connect the linguistics and poetics. The linguistics and poetics. If you can understand this statement clearly, then you can understand this topic, dear students. See here, since linguistics is the global scene of the verbal structure, okay, in linguistics, what the linguist study, they may study the verbal structure. They may study the verbal structure. Okay, but collecting all the samples from different natives, different speakers, they may gather all the statements, and out of those statements, they generalized linguists, they generalize some structures. They generalize some structures. Even we study some structures in tenses. Okay, some structures in tenses. Okay, here you should try to understand this point here. That is, linguistics is a global scene. Okay, linguists are not confined themselves, or the linguistic study is not confined to English study or Sanskrit language or Telugu language or Urdu language. Okay, linguists study all the languages in the world. Linguists study all the languages in the world. That is the point you should know. That's why linguistics is the global scene. Linguistics is the global scene of verbal structure. Okay, in all the languages, the main or independent part is structure. That's why the linguist first study in any language, they study the structure of the language sentence, or that linguistic structures that may present in that particular language. If we study the structures, then we can understand the language. Okay, that's why as they studied many languages, almost all the languages, okay, they compare the sentence pattern. What is the sentence pattern of Telugu language? SOV, SOV, subject, object, and verb. Karta, karma, kriya. But in English, subject, verb, and object. Subject, verb, and object. Okay, this is how they studied Telugu language, they studied English language, and then they compared the structure, the structural differences. But the structure is independent in any language. The structure is independent in any language. Okay, so here, okay, since linguistics is the global scene of verbal structure, poetics may be regarded as an integral part of linguistics. Okay, poetics is an integral part of linguistics. Okay, in linguistics, what is the main scene? What is the main scene? Yeah, the verbal structure is the main scene. The verbal structure is the main point. Okay, what does this poetics deal with? What does this poetics deals with? Surely the poetics deals with the problem of verbal structure. The problem of verbal structure. Right? The linguistics has its main source, okay, the verbal structure. This poetics study that verbal structure. That's why this poetics is integral part of that linguistics. This poetics is integral part of that linguistics. Okay, that is the relation between linguistics and poetics. Linguistics and poetics. This is what Roman Jacobson stated. Okay, but it is, as a scholar, for him, it is not enough to state. He has to prove that. He has to prove that. Okay. Okay, cows give milk. We people drink milk. It doesn't mean that we are the subcategory of cows. It doesn't mean that we are the subcategory of the cows. We are the consumers of that milk. Okay, at the same time, those cows are not the subcategory of our race, as we are consuming their milk. Okay, just we are utilizing, just we are consuming that milk. Okay, other than that, there is no relation. We are feeding, they are giving milk, simple thing. Other than that, there is no relation. But here, as there is a common point, verbal structure in linguistics and in poetics, he concluded that poetics is an integral part of linguistics. Okay, the others may think like that. That's why he has to prove how this poetics is an integral part of linguistics. An integral part of linguistics. Okay, yes, students, just respond to me. Could you catch the statement? Respond, anyone. Could you catch the main statement here? Yeah. Could you catch the main statement?
Yes, sir.
Yes. What is the main statement? Here now in this discussion, what is the main statement? Simple thing. This is the main topic sentence. Okay, simple thing. Poetics is regarded as, or poetics may be regarded as, an integral part of linguistics. An integral part of linguistics. That is the main topic. That is the main theme in this topic. Okay, so let us discuss how he proved. We should know how he proved. Okay, simply the simple statement is not enough. In knowledge exposure, in the scholarly world, okay, the statements can't be stated simply. Okay, they have to prove these statements. They have to defend these statements. Okay, then come to this point. For this claim, now the claim is that, okay, now the claim this Roman Jacobson made is that poetics is an integral part of linguistics. Poetics is an integral part of linguistics. Okay, but there are some objections. There are some arguments against this statement. Now, this Roman Jacobson has to answer those arguments which are against his statement. Okay, now we have to discuss them. We have to understand what are those objections and how he clarified those objections. Okay, are you clear? Yes. So the first objection is that it is evident that many devices studied by poetics are not confined to verbal art. Okay, surely the poetics deals mainly the problem of verbal structure. The poetics deals mainly with the problems of verbal structure. It doesn't mean that the poetics study only the verbal structure. This is the point. Okay. It doesn't mean that the poetics study only the verbal structure. That is the argument now. Not only the verbal structure, this poetics, this poetics is not confined to only the verbal art. It studies many other devices other than this verbal art. Poetics may be found not only in verbal art, even in other arts, we can find that poetic effect. That is the argument now. Okay, got this argument? Got this question against Raman Jacobson's statement? Simple thing. If he simply says that poetics is an integral part of linguistics, the first objection is that many devices studied by poetics. Poetics study many devices, but this poetics study, the poetics study is not confined to only verbal structure, only verbal art. It may study other arts, it may study other devices also. Then how can we simply conclude poetics is an integral part of linguistics? That is the question. That is the question. Now, Raman Jacobson has to explain that answer, has to give you his answer. He has to defend himself from that question, from that argument. That's why he started to explain. Try to understand this point. To explain this statement, Raman Jacobson referred to the possibility of transposing Wuthering Heights into a motion picture. Okay, see what are the other devices that can be studied in poetics, that can be studied in poetics. Okay, see, in addition to literature, this poetics study the film, okay, the motion pictures, okay, and other performing arts. Okay, for movie, what may be the source? Surely the story. Okay, there should be a story first. Then the director or the screenplayer, okay, they may adopt that all the story into their terminology, into their ideology, and they may convert into a motion picture. Okay, but the main plot is there. Okay, though the total verbal art, the shape of the verbal art changed. Though the total shape of the verbal art may be changed, but the story, the plot of the story, or the structure of the story, structure of the plot remains the same. The structure of the plot remains the same. Okay, the order may be changed, but what is plot? Then a series of incidents. The series of incidents in the movie, the incidents may be presented in a zigzag way or in a flashback, but the incidents may be connected. The incident may be connected in different way. Okay, so the plot is common. He explained that. Okay, for example, if the story of the Wuthering Eyes was adopted to make a film, to make a movie, that is motion picture, then this transposition may affect the shape of the verbal art. This may affect the shape of the verbal art, but still certain structural features of the plot, are preserved despite the disappearance of their verbal shape. Despite the disappearance, of course, there may be disappearance. There may be a chance for the disappearance of the verbal shape. You know, you might have seen the movie Snehitudu. Okay, Snehitudu. Yeah, who are the actors in that movie, Snehitudu?
Vijay and others, sir.
Vijay, then Ram, Sriram, I think, Sriram and Jeva. These three. Actually, that movie was that movie adopted the novel of the Chatan Bhagat. The novel of the Chatan Bhagat, that is the 5 point someone. That is the novel. Okay, but when that novel was adopted to make a film, okay, to entertain the audience, okay, they changed the shape of that novel. They changed the shape of that novel. They added some more ingredients. Okay, they added some more content to that movie. But the main idea, the main plot remains unchanged. The main plot remains unchanged. Okay, that's why he says that if we take that example, Wuthering Heights, okay, if this Wuthering Heights adopted to make a motion picture, then the certain structural features of their plot are pressure. Okay, for example, you know, frescoes. What are frescoes? The paintings in caves. The paintings in caves. Okay, Elephanta caves, Ajanta and Ellora caves. Okay, in those caves, if you go inside and in that wall, we can find some pictures. In fact, those pictures narrate a story. That may be Ramayana, that may be a scene of Sundarakanda, like that. Okay, dear students, here you should understand the point that even the shape of this verbal art is changed, but the plot or certain structural features of the plot remain the same. Okay, remain the same. That's why there are different arts based on that common structural plot, structural features of the plot. We can compare this story, the Wuthering Heights, and the movie that was made using this Wuthering Heights. Then we can compare those two. Likewise, if the story of Ramayana or some portion of Ramayana was painted on the walls of the cave or den, guha, okay, then we can compare that art with this art. Now we can compare the movie with the text. We can compare the movie of the Snehitudu with the text of Chatan Bhagat, the 5 point someone. The 5 point someone. At the same time, we can compare the legend that is Ramayana with this frescoes. That means the painting on the walls of that caves. Okay, that's why he says that different arts are comparable. Different arts are comparable. Okay, in short, he says many poetic features belong not only to the science of language, but to the whole theory of science, that is to general semiotics. This point is important, dear students, how he connected to the linguistics. Okay, he says that many poetic features belong not only to the science of language, Okay, what is the science of language? Linguistics, or the study of language. Okay, so where do we find these poetic features? Surely in language, but literary language. Okay, if the language is studied, surely this literary language is not exempted from that study. Oh, okay, even the literary language is also the sample for the language. So many poetic features belong not only to the science of language, but he says that but to the whole. Okay, these poetic features belong to whole theory of science, whole theory of science, that is in general to the general linguistics, semiotics, to the general semiotics. Okay, whatever may be in the form of sign that convey a particular meaning, that sends a meaning, or that represents a meaning, then surely it is a sign. Surely it is a sign. If it is so, the painting on the wall is a sign, because it tells or it gives us some meaning. It gives us some meaning. Okay, shoot the birds, but not with the guns. Shoot the birds, but not with the guns. It is just a statement. Okay, it may be just a notice at the park. Okay, or at the sanctuary, bird sanctuary. Okay, but in that statement, we can find the poetic effect. We can find the poetic effect. That's why he says that not only not only to the science of language, but these poetic features belong to the whole theory of science. Okay, whole theory of science, which studies the whole theory of the science, SIGNS, science, surely general semiotics. Surely general semiotics. Okay. Now, this statement is valid not only for the verbal art. This statement is valid not only for the verbal art, but also for all varieties of language. Not only for the verbal art, this statement, the poetic effect is not only in the verbal art. Okay, it belongs to, or it may be valid for all varieties of language, since language shares many properties with some other systems of science. Language shares many properties with other systems of science, or even with all of them, even with all of them. Okay, so as in the case of language, okay, we can find many signs outside the language. At the same time, we can find the same some properties in common. We may find some common properties in other signs as well as in language. In other signs as well as in language, right? So that is in this way he concluded, or he explained that this poetic study though it is confined to the verbal, it is not confined to the verbal art. Okay, it is not confined to the verbal art. Okay, now this yeah, what is the argument actually? The poetics the poetic study is not only confined to the verbal art. Okay, it may study different devices. It may study different areas. Now he says that not only in verbal art, even in other different areas also, we can find such poetic effect. Such poetic effect. Surely it is good logic. Surely it is good logic. Okay, now he proved, he answered the question like that. Now the second objection is that the relation between the word and the world, the relation between the word and world is confined to the verbal art, is confined to the verbal art. This is another doubt. Okay, this is another objection, right? Excuse me, please, church. Yeah, the second objection is that The relation between the word and the world is confined to the verbal art only. Okay, in this uh, verbal art, in this verbal art, the relation between the word and the world is confined to the verbal art only. Okay, now the question is relation between the word and world. Okay, whose thing is this word? Whose thing is this word? Surely this word is the individual thing or the human thing. Then in this world, other than this human, other than the human thing that is a world, there are many things such as trees, okay, animals, birds, and seas, rivers, rocks, mountains. There are many things. There are many things. Okay. So here the question of relations between the word and the world concern not only verbal art but actually all kinds of discourse. All kinds of discourse. Okay. So the relation not only in linguistics, not only in verbal art. Okay, the relation between the word and world is not only in verbal art. He says that it actually, okay, consent to all kinds of discourse. Consent to all kinds of discourse. Okay, now what is discourse? What do you understand the word discourse? Okay, for example, if you speak something on the river Godavari, our Godavari, okay, if other people and if some people, for example, 100 people spoke something about this Godavari, okay, and if we can collect all those words, all those statements, and if anyone present all those ideas regarding this regarding the statements on this Ganges, the statement, sorry, the statements on Godavari, not Ganges, okay, Godavari, then all this knowledge, what is shared, what is represented, either orally or written form, that is discourse. That is discourse, right? So in the verbal art, we can find there is some information on particular thing. There is some information on particular thing. Okay, for example, A.K. Raman's poem, The Flea. Sorry, the Strider. Okay, A.K. Ramanujan poem, The Strider. He created some discourse on that insect, the strider. That is discourse because he represented on written form. He represented in written form. That is in the form of a poem. He represented some discourse on that strider, on that strider. Likewise, some poet may create some discourse on the tree. Okay, some people, some writer may create some discourse on the clouds, on the sky, or on a beautiful girl. This is all the discourse. This is all the discourse, right? So here we should understand this point. The question of relations between the word and world concerns not only verbal art, but actually all kinds of discourses. All kinds of discourses. Okay. Not only in literature, in other ways, there are discourses. There are discourses. For example, the doctors may speak of this COVID. Okay, they may write something on paper about the COVID. That is also a discourse. That is also a discourse. For example, if you speak on monetization, demonetization, demonetization, then that all the information what we discussed is discourse. Okay, so not only the verbal discourse, there are all other discourse. There are different discourses. There are different discourses. Okay, so the question of the question of relations between the word and world is not only concerned not only to the verbal art, but also all kinds of discourse, all kinds of discourse, because there are many other kinds of discourse. Okay, now linguistics is likely to explore all possible relations, all possible problems of relation between discourse and the universe of discourse, the discourse and universe of discourse, right? So even in linguistics, it is very clear that the linguist does not rely on the individual speech, does not rely on individual speech. He may collect the possible number of speeches from different people. Okay, in the same manner, okay, the linguistics is likely explore all the possible problems of relation between discourse, that may be one discourse, especially the verbal discourse, and the universe of discourse, What is the universe of discourse? The cauldron on a number of discourses. Okay, all the possible types of discourses, Among them, this discourse, what we are speaking, is surely the part, or surely this discourse in another way has some relation with that, The linguist may study that particular discourse in relation with the universe of the discourse, Okay, when the language is study, the linguist study not only the individual act of speech, they collected different samples. Even they were not confined to, or they didn't confine only to that study. Even they studied the culture of the people. Even they studied the religious practices of the people. Okay, even the history and even the legends, ancient legends, they studied. Okay, so they were not confined to any particular specific area. They studied all the possible areas to discuss the discourse in the verbal art, the discourse in the science of language. Okay, so sometimes we may hear that. Okay, sometimes we may hear that. Okay, poetics is concerned with the evaluation. Okay, we may discuss that. We may think, or we may hear that. As the poetics set some rules, okay, we may misunderstand like this. Okay, the poetics is concerned with the evaluation. Okay, it may evaluate some linguistic source. We may misunderstand like that. Okay, in that way we separated. Poetics from linguistics. We separated poetics from linguistics, or the poetics from other verbal arts. Okay, sorry, other verbal practices, or other verbal messages, we can say. Even other verbal arts, we can say sometimes. Because even the prose is also verbal art, The prose is also verbal art, not only the poetry. The prose is also verbal art. Okay, here, this separation of the two fields from each other, this separation of the two fields from each other is based on a current. That means at present, the present interpretation. This separation of the two fields from each other is based on the present interpretation or the current interpretation of the contrast. The current interpretation of the contrast between the structure of the poetry and other types of verbal structures. The structure of the poetry and other verbal types of other types of verbal structure. Okay, the structure of the poetry is different from the structure of the prose. Based on that, we may feel that these two are separate. These two are separate. Okay, but Roman Jacobson says that this is erroneous interpretation. This is wrong interpretation. This is wrong interpretation, right? So one is said to be, that means the verbal, the structure of the poetry. The structure of the poetry is said to be, okay, is said to be opposite. Okay, is said to be opposed to the other, by their nature or character, by their nature or character. In the poetry, we may see the difference between the poetry and prose in composition, sentence composition. Okay, that is a metrical composition. It is general statement. It is general sentence. That's what we feel. But here, and that nature, okay, the nature of this poetry is, the nature of this poetry is non-casual. This is non-casual, not lazily constructed. The lines in the poem are not casually constructed. They are not casually constructed. Okay, they are non-casual, because there is a particular purpose. Okay, non-casual and purposeful character of the poetic language. Try to understand this point. Why this why this difference or this idea made the scholars to think differently. What made them to different? What made them to think like this? To think that these two fields are different. That is what he is going to explain. Okay, their opposition may be, their separation may be caused by the structure, caused by the nature or characters of those 2 points, those 2 structures. Okay, the structure of the poetry and other structures, other types of verbal structures. Okay, the structure of the poetry is non-casual and purposeful. Non-casual and purposeful. Whereas, okay, these other verbal structures are casual and designless. Casual and designless in their nature. Maybe this fact, Rama Jacobson argues that this fact made the scholars think that the 2 fields are different. The fields of poetics and the field of linguistics is different. Okay, but he says that it is erroneous interpretation. It is erroneous interpretation. We can say it is wrong interpretation. Wrong interpretation. In fact, any verbal behavior, is goal directed, goal-directed, but the aims are different. But the aims are different. Okay. Any verbal behavior. When you speak to your friend, you may have a particular goal. When you speak to your father, you may have a particular goal. When you speak to your teacher, you may have a particular goal. Surely, all verbal performances, or we can say all verbal behaviors are goal directed, but the aim is different. In the same manner, for this verbal art also, for this literature also, there is a goal. There is a goal. For our speech, there is a goal. In the classroom, if you speak, there is a goal. When the teacher teaches something in the class, there is a goal. Because any verbal behavior is goal directed, but the aims are different. Right? So there is a close correspondence, much closer than the critics believe. He says, Roman Jacobson says that there is a close correspondence, much closer than much closer than critics believe, between the question of linguistic phenomena expanding in the space and time and the spatial and temporal speech of literary models. Okay. In linguistics, they may study the specific sample of the speech in the spatial, expanding in space, expanding in time. Okay, temporal space, temporal. They may expand in temporal. That means they may go yesterday, the day before yesterday, 10 years back, or 100 years back. They may go in the, they may expand in the temporal point. They may expand in a spatial point. They may go out of this state, out of the country, out of the continent, and they may go anywhere. In the same manner, okay, even in literary models, we can find the same spatial and temporal that means aspects, the spatial and temporal aspects, not even in the verbal arts. That means in literature, even in the literature, we can find the past actions, the 100 years back actions, 10 years back actions, or the beginning of the human action. In Paradise Lost, Milton took us back to the creation. Okay, he presented Adam and Eve. Okay, how many years back it is? Okay, even in the literature also, we may be taken back to the past. That is temporal. Okay, even in the same Paradise Lost, he led us to the hell. He led us to the heaven. A discussion of the heaven, discussion of the hell. Okay, that is a special, different places. Right? So he says that Roman Jacobson says that there is a close relation, much closer than the linguists believe, that there is a close relation between the linguistic models in terms of spatial and temporal, and this literary models in terms of spatial and temporal models, temporal aspects. Okay, so in literature, in linguistics, right? So the space and temporal in linguistics, and the space and time, the space and time. Okay, tempo in that literature. Okay, these two are closer, much closer than the linguist belief. This is the Roman Jacobson's argument, dear students. Okay, So for the today's class, okay, with this relation between this linguistic phenomena and literary models, try to understand the linguistic phenomena and literary models. What are the connecting points? Spatial and temporal, spatial and temporal, spatial dimension and temporal dimension. In these two dimensions, we can find the same effect in linguistics and the same effect in literary models. Okay, then there is a closer relation between these two. Okay, so for today's class, with this, I would like to wind up. Okay, now next Ratnam sir will take the class. That's why, dear students, uh, tomorrow I will inform before 1 hour when I will my link my class, and I will share the link. Join today like this today. I would like to inform you all. Okay,